try and pursue.
Okay, Tom Bateman, thank you very much for that reporting. We are still seeing some action there at Stewart Air Force Base. Some people moving up and down the stairs. It is, however, as you can see, very dark on that airfield. Not particularly easy at the moment to tell who is moving up and down the stairs. We understand, as U.S. media have reported, that this is the plane that is carrying President Maduro and his wife Celia Flores to this Air Force Base, where they will then be transported to New York for arraignment this week. As we're watching these images, I want to bring in Congressman Joaquin Castro. He's a Democrat from Texas and serves as the ranking member of the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee. He's also a member in the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, thank you for joining us again on BBC News. What do you make of the dramatic events of the last day?
Well, I mean, this appears to be a war of regime change about oil and valuable natural resources and land, and really an aggressiveness by Donald Trump against Latin American countries that harkens back to the Monroe Doctrine and also harkens back to the Cold War era, where the United States unfortunately backed a lot of right-wing governments that committed horrible human rights abuses against their people. And we made a big mistake during those years to assume that every right-wing dictator was a friend of the United States, when in fact dictators can come from either side of the political spectrum. Nicolas Maduro was not a good guy. The election results were very suspicious in the last presidential election. But if that was how we determined who we were going to go take out around the world, you'd be taking out a lot of leaders around the world. And yet Donald Trump has praised Vladimir Putin. He's praised MBS in Saudi Arabia. He's never confronted China on their treatment of the Uyghurs. And so there's a lot of, unfortunately, hypocrisy here and irony as well.
Congressman, President Trump, the Secretary of State, the Defense Secretary, they have been clear this is a very different situation because President Maduro presented a direct threat to the United States in being the head of what they called an illegal drug trafficking operation. And they have said many times poisoning thousands of Americans, killing thousands of Americans. What do you make of that justification for this operation?
A few things. First, Americans by and large stand against these dangerous, poisonous drugs that have killed and harmed so many Americans. But I think it's important to realize a few things. Number one, Venezuela doesn't traffic in fentanyl, which over the last many years has been the drug most responsible for the deadly overdoses of Americans. Secondly, if you look at where these boats were going, many of them were not headed to the United States. They were headed, well, we don't know for sure because the government, the United States government, my government never said who was on those boats, exactly what they were carrying, presented any evidence, but we'll assume that they were carrying drugs. Those drugs were very likely going to Europe, not to the United States. And then it would be a lot easier to believe that this was about containing drugs, stopping drugs, if President Trump had not, in fact, pardoned one of the largest drug traffickers the United States and the world has ever known, the former president of Honduras, and doing so in a very, very bold and irresponsible way. And so I think most Americans don't believe that this is about drugs when you pardon a large drug dealer and when the facts on the ground speak differently than what the president is saying.
Congressman, the Secretary of State talked a bit earlier about why Congress was not notified. And he said, this is not the type of mission you could notify members of Congress on. At the core, this was about two indicted fugitives of American justice. And he said, you can't pre-notify because it endangers the mission. And President Trump then followed on to say Congress has a tendency to leak. What's your response to that?
Well, I think that's wrong. And it directly contradicts what he told me and the rest of the House of Representatives in a briefing that the administration did the last week that we were in session in December, where I directly asked him whether he would come to Congress seeking an authorization for use of military force. And his answer was that we will go to Congress for anything that requires an AUMF. And so I would say that taking out the leader of a sovereign country, bombing it to do that, and then going in there onto the ground of that country to accomplish the mission, that's something that you need congressional approval for, and certainly notification before it happens and not after it happens. So the administration has failed to include Congress in this decision. And the American people don't elect 535 members of Congress to be on the sidelines of big decisions like this.
What about what happens next? President Trump says the U.S. will run Venezuela. What do you think that means, and what are your concerns there?
I mean, that is deeply concerning on a few fronts. Number one, as a world, not just as a nation, but as a world, we tried to get away from that, where one country would directly from Washington, D.C. or another capital control what's going on in a sovereign nation. And Donald Trump is taking us back decades, if not generations. And then also, when you think about how much it's going to cost the United States of America and our taxpayers, the American people, this is not a $500 endeavor. This is billions and billions and billions of dollars that we're talking about. It's as if the American president never learned the lessons of Iraq or Afghanistan. And really, the people that stand to benefit the most, if not the only ones who will benefit, I believe, are his political cronies, who will figure out a way to divvy up the different natural resources and industries in Venezuela and make money for themselves. And in the meantime, for Americans, they're losing their health care coverage right now because President Trump and the Republicans didn't extend health care subsidies. Child care prices are going up, grocery prices are going up, all kinds of prices in the United States are going up, and we're about to spend billions of dollars running Venezuela from Washington, D.C.
President Trump has said removing President Maduro makes the entire Western Hemisphere safer. And our reporter who's been speaking to the diaspora, Venezuelan diaspora in Miami, they are celebrating the removal of President Maduro, saying he is a dictator who has suppressed his own people for years and years, and that this was the right move. Is there an argument to be made that this indeed was a pinpoint operation to remove someone who's considered a dictator, not just by the U.S., but by many countries, and that this will help Venezuela moving forward?
Yeah, I think a few conflicting things, or things that feel like they're conflicting. First, I'm not surprised at all that many Venezuelans are celebrating because Nicolas Maduro was not a good guy to his people. He did abuse his people. He very likely lost the election to Mr. Gonzalez in the last presidential election. But at the same time, that just doesn't justify Donald Trump under false pretenses and for the reasons of acquisition of oil and resources and land to go take out a sovereign president and put in his own person as the head of that country and to temporarily at least run the country from Washington, D.C.
What do you expect to hear from the administration in Congress this week? It appears that the actual military operation, of course, was completed. Are you going to seek an authorization for any further military action?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was part of the resolution that Jim McGovern had that we lost by 2 votes. This would have prevented this action. It was a bipartisan resolution with Representative Massey of Kentucky. We lost that vote by 2 votes. We're going to refile that this week. Ilhan Omar and others also have another resolution, a similar resolution. So there will be further votes on this. And this should be an easy one for members of Congress. Now that there was a land strike, now that the United States and the president has said that the United States government is running Venezuela, and it seems like we'll have some occupation of Caracas there in some form or fashion, then the Congress should be willing to say, hey, we're going to step up and have a role in deciding what this looks like or whether we're even going to permit it.
Congressman, really good to get your perspective. Thank you so much for joining us today on BBC News.
Good to be with you.
And we're just seeing some people disembarking the plane at the moment.